welcome to Central Youth Friday night. My name's Kate, if you don't know me, and my job is to oversee all of the children's and the youth ministries across all of our sites at Central Vineyard. So this evening we have people joining us from Northampton and from Raunds, from Wellingborough and possibly Kettering too. And anyone else who has joined us from elsewhere as well. So a big welcome to you all. We hope that you are well. This evening we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Easter, as it's Good Friday today, and so this is the Easter weekend, and so it'd be fitting for us to focus our time this evening on Easter. So what does Easter look like from the world's point of view? At this time of year, what do we see in the world that represents Easter to the world? So we have lots of Easter eggs. Hopefully you are all going to be getting some Easter eggs this Easter. You might have Easter egg hunts, although those will have to probably be done in your gardens or in your home as we are on lockdown. You might have an Easter cake. We always have a lovely Easter cake which tends to have this sort of yellow icing that swirls inside it, which is always really yummy and something I look forward to. Hot cross buns. Now, I don't like hot cross buns, but I heard that they actually do chocolate hot cross buns now, so looking forward to seeing if I can get hold of some of those. And then it's really what marks the beginning of springtime. So what does springtime look like, with sunny days like we've had this week, lighter days, so as the clocks have changed, the night time is lighter for longer. And there's just a really lovely change in the season happening when there's a really lovely smell of spring in the air. So in terms of the church and in terms of Christianity, what do we think of when it comes to Easter time? So we have the beginning of Lent, which starts with Pancake Day. So people will mark this time by having pancakes together. And then Lent follows, which is a time where we may choose to give up something that is important to us, to replace that time to be doing something where we are spending time with God. Then we have Palm Sunday. So Palm Sunday is the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem and he was worshipped and celebrated. And then we have Maundy Thursday. Now, Maundy Thursday is the day that Jesus shared his Last Supper with the disciples. And he tried to explain to the disciples at this time what was going to happen and how he was going to die and be the perfect sacrifice for his people. And so communion marks with the bread representing Jesus's body, and then the wine representing the blood that he shed. And then Good Friday, which is a happy day and also a sad day. So it's sad because, of course, Jesus suffered the most unimaginable, painful death. But it was also happy because it marked the moment when all of the bad things in the world had been taken to the cross by Jesus to be taken away from us forever. And then we have Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday is the day where Jesus rose again, which represents for us the overcoming of death. So death was defeated, and that was not the end of the story. So Jesus showed us that there was going to be a new life. So Jesus dying on the cross. Do we fully understand why this happened? And why did God make this the plan? Do we struggle to understand this concept? Because it is the most significant event in the Christian calendar. And we often think that we should just understand it. If we're brought up in a Christian home, or we are a new Christian, maybe this has been explained to us, but we might have bits that are missing for us. We might not actually 100% understand it, and it might have left us with some questions as to why why it actually had to happen. So I've unpicked the teachings of Easter for myself, knowing that it left me with a lot of questions when I was younger. And I think it may be because the story has been mostly told from the books of the New Testament, which tell us what happened, which is fine. But the important thing is that we need to travel back a bit, because it doesn't tell us where these things necessarily came from, or it might do, but not in a way that gives us as much information as we might need. So I'm going to trace this story back right to the beginning of time, when God made the world, so that we can see how it all came about. I'm also going to look at the character of God, as I often get asked what sort of God would send his own son into the world to die. So, God made the world, and it was good. And it tells us this in Genesis 1 verse 31. It says, God saw all that he had made, and it was good. Then the first people, Adam and Eve, did something that changed life forever. Adam and Eve went against God's best for them, and nothing was the same again. Things had changed. Love had now been broken. And this meant, for the first time, they experienced what it felt like to not be close to God and not be close to each other. Now you might ask, why did God allow this to happen? He made the world and he had control of the world and what went on in the world. So why did he allow this to happen? Well, to help us answer this, let's look at these few questions about what sort of God we have. So, is he a controlling God who needed to control Adam and Eve like puppets, so that when he pulled the strings, they moved? Is he a God of conditions, by where they had to follow a strict set of rules, or he says he's done with them, and if they don't, they were just not going to be worthy of his love? Is he a God who has had enough of them if they keep messing up? And did he have like a tolerance level that meant that if they'd gone too far, there was no coming close to him again? Well, if your answers to all of these questions are no, then we have to assume that God loved Adam and Eve and he wanted a two-way relationship with them, that he wanted them to choose to love him back because they wanted to, rather than because they were forced to out of fear. So if you think God is a God that forces us to love him, then that really isn't the God that we learn about in the Bible, that the Bible teaches us about. And there's a really good Bible verse that really sort of sums up what God is like. And it's in Psalm 145 verse 8, and it says, "The Lord is gracious and compassionate. He's slow to anger and he's rich in love." Now I really feel like this says it all. The verse doesn't say the Lord gets cross and angry really quickly and only loves us if we do all of the right things all of the time. So after the fall, how did God help his people? The Bible tells us loads in the book of Leviticus about what we can do to make ourselves right with God again and be pure again, like Adam and Eve were before they went against God's best for them. In chapter 16 in Leviticus verse 5, it says that Moses had to bring God 2 goats as a sin offering, because when people messed up, they had to make things right with God by giving him an offering. Now this would be something that was pure, something like a lamb or a goat. It's something that had done nothing wrong, and it was a bit like paying a fine, I guess. When we think of a goat, it's actually where the saying scapegoat comes from. If you've heard that before, I'm not sure. If you haven't, then ask somebody old like me to explain it to you, or you could look it up. But it's basically, a scapegoat is someone that takes the blame for something that you've done wrong. So they would take that place of you, so that the blame was laid on them and that you went free. So of course, this is what people used to have to do, and it would just go on and on like that, and God's people pretty much kept going round and round in circles, messing up and then bringing God gifts and starting all over again. Now, there were people in the Old Testament that God chose to be examples to lead the way. These are people that often did their best by God, and they were really close to God, and God would show them what he wanted them to do to lead his people. Now, these people are people like Noah, Abraham and Moses, to name a few. Later on in the Old Testament, there was another guy called Isaiah, and there's a whole book in the Bible called Isaiah, and it's a book of prophecy where it's full of stuff that God had told him that was going to happen. And then these things happened, and so Isaiah had prophesied that God had a plan, and the plan was to send a saviour to come into the world to save all of his people once and for all. Now, this was going to be God pouring himself into a human and coming down to earth to be amongst his people on the earth, so God on earth. Now, this was not only going to be God on earth coming to meet his people. This was going to be God on earth changing the way that we interact with him and bringing a new way of being close to God again forever. So this was like God coming to be the sacrifice for us, to be the thing that was going to come and take all of the blame for the things that we had done wrong or the things that we were going to do wrong, just like the old way of doing things with the lamb or the goat. The new way would be to be coming close to Jesus, who was going to be God on earth. The thing that strikes me most about all of this is how God could have chosen anything to do this job, but he actually chose to send himself. And I think that just tells us so much about what our God's character is like. He, who was blameless, decided to send himself in the form of Jesus. So what sort of God is this? A God that loves us so much that he takes all of the bad things away from his people. You see, there's nothing that can separate you from God's love. He hasn't put a condition on loving you. He isn't silly. He knows that we mess up. And in some ways, he's more interested in what we do about the messing up than the messing up itself, although he knows that's not great. But it's about what we choose to do when we want to come close to him again. God doesn't want an army of people that follow after him to try and please him out of fear or out of trying to be accepted by him. He wants a following of people who love. He sent Jesus to be in the world as a wonderful example of how to love in the way that he loves. And that's exactly what he wants from us. So this is why the message of Easter is so important to remember, not only at Easter time, but all of the time. It's not only a story to show us, to remind us that God sent Jesus to be our friend and saviour, the perfect sacrifice, who was blameless like the goat or the lamb, who took all of the blame for us, and now we get to be his best friend. It's also a time for us to reflect on what sort of God we have. When we trace the story right back to the beginning of time and we see God's character throughout, we see what a wonderful God we have. Remember that verse, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. Is that a God that we owe everything to? So this Easter time, let's remember not only that God sent his only son, who was a part of him, to take the blame for us, so that we had a new way through our relationship with Jesus to come close to him again. But let us remember what sort of God we have and how in awe of him we are for the way that he shows love to every single one of us. Lastly, whilst preparing this talk, a song came to my mind, so I've posted the link to it on this post. So it'd be great if you could take some time to listen to that song and just have a think about what a wonderful God we have. Take care everyone, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.